Malcolm O'Hagan, what is the American Writers Museum?
Well, it's going to be a place where you can visit with our great writers, um, understand uh, the impact that their works have had on our history and our culture. And you're going to be able to do that in all sorts of interesting, fun, and interactive ways.
You use the future tense when you talk about it.
We're still in the concept stage. And as you know, creating a new museum, certainly on the scale that we're thinking of, takes a considerable period of time. So we're just developing ideas. We're inviting people to give us their ideas as what they'd like to see in the museum, because we want it to be sort of a visitor designed and driven museum rather than many museums are started by somebody who has a collection and they want to memorialize it and house it, and they have their own ideas as to how they want to do that. But here we want it to be sort of a democratic process because there are so many people that love books, love to read, but we also want to know what it is they'd like to know and see in a museum context.
When did you come up with the idea of an American Writers Museum?
The end of last year, I
So, 2009.
2009, I grew up in Ireland, and there's a wonderful writers' museum in Dublin. I retired a few years ago, and I signed on as a docent at the Library of Congress. I love reading, I love books, I love everything related to literature. And I asked, well, where is the American Writers Museum? And lo and behold, it doesn't exist, which is strange.
Do any museums have wings or areas dedicated to American writing?
The only things I'm aware of are the individual authors' homes, like Whitman's or Emily Dickinson, which have been turned into museums dedicated to the individual author. The great libraries, the Library of Congress, the New York Public Library, have exhibits relating to literature from time to time. But there is no place where you can come and sort of see the whole picture and span of American literature and the impact it's had on our history and our culture from the early days up to modern times.
So, lots of people have ideas, Malcolm O'Hagan. You have this idea for an American Writers Museum. What's the next step? What did you do next?
I started talking to people about the idea.
And who were people? What kind of people?
Well, actually, one of the first people I talked to about it was the president of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum in Cleveland. It's a wonderful place. It's exciting, it's dynamic, it's fun. And I asked him what he thought about this idea, and he said it was wonderful. He said, you know, rock is a little hard, but this has gravitas. And he said, go for it. And so that was encouraging. Then I went to the literature director at the NEA, talked to him about it, a short discussion, and I said at the end of the discussion, what do you think about it? He said, well, I'm more excited about it than you are. Then he introduced me to people in the literary community in New York, and without exception, everybody has responded enthusiastically and wants to be a part of it. I mean, sort of a typical response I get from people is, yeah, you know, it doesn't exist. That's amazing. Why doesn't it? You know, we need it.
People can be enthusiastic, but what about the money part of this?
The money will come. If the idea is right, if the concept is right, if it's properly presented, the money will come. You know, people give hundreds of millions of dollars every year to art museums and to science museums and children's museums. This is a museum that doesn't exist. There's nothing like it. It'll be a fantastic cultural institute, a museum of American literature, American Writers Museum. And I'm absolutely confident that there are people that will want to fund this because it doesn't exist, and we need it, and we should have it. We honor and you know, all our sports figures are rock stars. We have museums to everything from cotton to cowboys. Why don't we have a museum that honors the great writing and the great writers in America? It's time we had.
What about you personally? Have you spent money on this idea so far?
Well, I'm not a very rich man, but yeah, I'm putting in my own money initially to try to get the ball rolling. And then we're reaching out to other people for seed money, and ultimately we'll go out to cities and big funders for the $200 million that we anticipate this is going to take. We want to do it right. This is not going to be a half-baked, half-hearted effort.
When you say 200 million, how does that break down? Where are the cost breakdowns?
Well, we're anticipating a new building, spectacular top architect design building that'll make a statement that literature is important and ought to be housed in an appropriate place that honors the writers and their writings. And a lot of expense related to the exhibits. We plan to use all of the modern techniques that bring museums alive and make them interesting to people. There's getting the materials, there's hiring the staff, there's a lot of cost. 200 million in the museum world is not a big number.
Where would it be located?
Well, ideally in a large city that is also a destination city and has a literary heritage. And there are several places that meet those criteria.
Such as?
Well, it could be Washington, Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Atlanta, Chicago, LA, San Francisco.
Have you reached out to cities yet?
Not yet. We're not ready to do that. We hope in the next couple of months to develop a very comprehensive and impressive prospectus and business plan. And only when we have that in place will we go to the cities and start to present the idea and the concept to them.
So, Malcolm O'Hagan, what's your background?
Grew up in Ireland, in the west of Ireland, Yates country. Climbed Ben Bulben and spent many days on little Isle of Innisfree, so I guess I grew up with the Irish gene for love of literature. And came to America first as a graduate student, and then went back to Ireland, worked there for a couple of years, and well before the Celtic tiger took hold, and then things were not good, came back here, and I've lived in this country ever since.
And did you grow up reading Irish literature?
I was not a big reader when I was small, as surprising to say. When I went to college, I did read, and actually I didn't read Irish writers, I read American. And of course, during my business career, I was primarily reading business literature, which was interesting and helpful, but not the stuff that touched my soul. Since retiring, I read as much as I can and can never get enough of it.
What touches your soul?
Well, poetry does, of course. I mean, just the beautiful use of words and the passion for all sorts of things that's conveyed through poetry. Books like Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. I was probably, when I was a student, I read that book, and it just, I was furious when I read it about the way the family was treated and the way the migrant workers were treated. And it really got me all worked up. And I can almost still feel it when I think about it. So books like that, To Kill a Mockingbird, I mean, there's a lot of wonderful books that sort of deal with an issue like that, whether it's an issue of discrimination or if it's an issue of inspiration. I think it's wonderful. I mean, that's what books provide, and novels and poetry and short stories.
What about nonfiction?
Nonfiction, I mean, is fantastic. Biographies, particularly of interesting people. And history, as it's written today, not as there was when I was in school, is also fascinating. I mean, you learn. I like historic novels. That is a very nice way of learning about history, although doesn't have to be a novel anymore when you've got people like McCullough who write history in a way that's so accessible and enjoyable to read.
And who's on your advisory committee that people should be aware of?
Yeah, well, the advisory committee is a wonderful group of people, and they are to advise on the content. We have somebody from the Library of Congress. We have the president of the Academy of American Poets. We have the National Book Foundation. We have the president of the Poetry Society of America, the publisher of Poets and Writers, the publisher of Library of America. A lot of people like that who are very literate, very tied into the literary community, and extremely supportive of the concept and the idea.
In doing your research, has this ever been tried before?
I came across a blog, actually, that was back a number of years where people were just talking about the idea, and I can't imagine that others have not tried it in the past. And it's such an obvious thing, to have a museum honoring and American writers and literature. So I suspect that they have, but I haven't found any really strong evidence of that. And I would assume that if they did pursue it at the time, they weren't able to get the funding or whatever. But this time it's going to happen, for sure.
Has this become a full-time job for you, Malcolm O'Hagan, in your retirement?
I spent my career in business as an executive and worked very hard, but I've never worked harder than I've been working since the first of this year. It's consuming, frankly, because partly because everybody is so enthusiastic about the idea. Everybody I talk to just wants to be a part of it. They're excited. They say this is an idea whose time has come. And you know, when you're getting that sort of enthusiastic support, you just want to put everything into it, which is what I'm doing.
And the website is the AmericanWritersMuseum.org. Malcolm O'Hagan is the president of the American Writers Museum. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.